Now, joining us is Peter Andersen, Chief Investment Officer and Founder at Andersen Capital Management. Hello to you, Peter, and Happy New Year. I'm just wondering, what are your expectations for this name come this afternoon?
Well, even if they have a small beat, but volumes are not showing any kind of recovery, then analysts won't matter. Investors won't care about that. They will just trade the stock down. We really are looking for the guidance. It's all about guidance rather than just reporting earnings, because they've had such a terrible back year that investors will be looking to see if there's any recovery, especially in the beer sales.
Yeah, look, this has been a really tough time for some of these companies in the business of alcohol. As we mentioned, we've got consumers drinking less, and that's really a function of Gen Zs being sort of more a bit health conscious. Obviously, you've got the whole GLP-1 phase as well. Not to mention, these companies have been hit by, tariffs and changing trade landscapes as well. So, this company has obviously been trying to come up with ways to mitigate and address some of those challenges. So what have we got to hear in that guidance and the commentary, do you think?
Well, what we would like to hear is that they think that beer sales have bottomed and that they're starting to see inventories thin out and that there's no glut of inventory, and that the consumer, in terms of their sentiment for consumption of alcohol, might be turning from its low. But that's a tall order, and I really don't expect any of that today. I expect that there will be another fairly poor quarter and that they will have a wait and see, talking about the consumer, saying that the consumer hasn't really recovered yet. And on top of that, I think it will be very difficult for them to pivot to another strategy. They are kind of set in their ways and what they have. Corona, for instance, one of their major brands, and I don't see much upside, frankly, in this name. Now, you also mentioned that the nation's taste for alcohol has ebbed a bit, and that is certainly true, and we don't see signs of that coming back either. We don't know if it is an economically based choice or if it is a health-based choice, or maybe it's a little bit of both. But either way, these are not positive signals for the industry in general.
Yeah, obviously we've seen the relationship with alcohol consumption changing with some of the trends that you just mentioned, as I mentioned, with the anti-obesity drugs, with, of course, the new generation, perhaps choosing to do other things as well. We know that Constellation has also been exploring new spaces. I heard about cannabis-infused beverages too. Is there anything that this company is doing that's perhaps different to the others? Because it looks like they're all struggling as far as the performance is concerned. But, what stands out about this one?
Well, for instance, you mentioned cannabis-infused beverages. That is a long shot. In terms of consumer research, I don't know where they got that idea. Maybe they know more than we do about the developing trends of Gen Z, but I doubt that will be an attractor. And other than just lowering prices, for instance, and reinvigorating the brands, they're kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place. So other competitors are trying other things like new types of beverages, not as far-reaching as the cannabis-infused beverage. So maybe on the margin, with some incremental types of hard liquor type discoveries, maybe that will help them. But as I said, I think it will all be about how they report volumes today and what their guidance is going forward. And it is all about the consumer. Sadly, this kind of business really does depend so much on consumer sentiment and appetite for the beverage.
Sporting events. We've got the World Cup this year. I know that having covered China for many years, this is a time when you do sort of start to see alcohol consumption and trends going up, because they love to sit there and watch the soccer. I'm just wondering, does that have any impact, as far as promotional activity, etc., marketing around that?
Right. Yeah, history shows us that it could have a, marginal bump, but it kind of reminds me years ago when I covered the paper industry, and analysts said in an Olympic year, there will be more demand for paper. And that just never really was demonstrated to be correct. And I kind of think it's the same way with sporting events and alcohol consumption. I mean, because there are major sporting events, it doesn't necessarily indicate an improving, long-lasting trend. There may be a bump in volume then, but analysts will be looking very closely, not necessarily at that, but at the general long-term trend. If the consumer is generally returning to alcohol consumption, and we saw recently that alcohol consumption in this country is at a long-time low. So looking at that could be a leading indicator. We also see that the wanes of the health industry telling us that maybe a glass of wine a day is good. Then a year later, we hear that a glass of wine a day causes cancer. So that also impacts, I would say, the frailty of the situation.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, you know, you've had some sobering analyst calls for the booze business as well. A lot of what you've been saying as well. It's pretty confusing out there. But, you know,
Yes.
We do know that there is this Maha movement, and that seems to be firmly in pace at the moment. But, Peter, thank you so much for joining us today and getting us across your thoughts on this one and a bit of a preview for Constellation Brands. Peter Andersen, their Chief Investment Officer and founder, Andersen Capital Management. So let's